But Vidit goes rook e5 and he makes a mistake here, because now knight takes f6 is going to ruin the entire king side. Knight takes, he takes it on f6. If queen takes f6, you have simply check and it's mate even, not just the rook hanging. So he takes back with the g pawn, breaking his structure, and now e takes d4, attacking the rook and the knight. Again, queen takes d4 is met with queen b8 and c7 hangs. So you have to take on f5. And now a beautiful move here. Queen takes a5. This may be what Vidit missed, because if d takes c5, rook c5 and black is completely fine. But after queen takes a5, this was pinned this way, this was pinned this way, and now he takes on c5. Black is a pawn up, rook to c5, and of course taking on b4 would be a grave error, as there is an intermediate check and I'm a rook up. So that's why rook takes c5, queen takes on c5, and after queen takes c5, rook takes c5. Vidit is a pawn down and Mamedyarov plays g3. Maybe better was a4 with the idea of putting the rook on a1 and white would have a big edge. But g3, Vidit goes king g7. He should have come rook c2 on the 7th rank, and after rook b1, king f8, and I think the position was fine. But he goes king g7, rook d1, and now rook c2. But he misses Shakhriyar's entire point, b3. Beautiful move, and after rook takes a2 comes rook d4, and Mamedyarov is now winning this endgame. It's not easy, it's a complex endgame to win, but rook takes b4 taken. And now you have to use your pawns here, your rook and your king nicely. f5 played by Vidit, and maybe you don't need to believe the bar so much here. King g2, king g6. The king comes up to f3 and h5. Slowly and steadily Shakhriyar is playing. I mean, his dream position is rook f4 and b4. If he can do that, he would be winning. But Vidit doesn't allow that. You know, he keeps his rook active both ways. King e3 and now king f7. And rook to b8. And the plan is to now slowly push the pawn. I guess b4 is playable, but then some checks on the side start. So he goes rook b4 back, and Mamedyarov is waiting. Both players reach move 40. You can see Vidit was down to 41 seconds here. He plays rook b1, now has 24 minutes, while Mamedyarov has a good solid 19 minutes from the previous time control, and another 30 minutes will be added to his clock. He goes king d3. And if Mamedyarov gets king c2 and rook f4 and b4, he would win. So rook b2, very nice move, keeping up the pressure both ways. f3 is again a cool move by Shakhriyar. He wants to place his rook on f4 and he's okay to give up the g3 pawn. So king f7 by Vidit. And if Mamedyarov goes king c3, then rook g2 and he might lose both these pawns. So he goes king e3, he waits, and now king to g6. White goes rook to b8, rook b1, Vidit waiting around, and rook to b7. Now all of a sudden the position is not clear anymore. So Shakhriyar knows that he's winning, but he's not able to make progress. But Vidit has come down to 3 minutes on the clock. This could play a crucial role. Rook check. And now king f4. He goes back king d2. And rook to g1. This is excellent play. And by the way, rook b4, such a tricky move. If you take the pawn, I have rook f4 and then simply win with the queenside pawn. So Vidit goes king f7, an excellent move. Rook f4, and now important to go to e6 with your king. And he plays it. The point being that if you go b4 now, which Shakhriyar does play, then very important king e5. Again, Vidit playing some accurate endgame chess, king e3. And now rook b1, very important. Because if you take here, b5 and rook b4 is winning. So rook b1 puts the rook behind the passer. And at this point, Mamedyarov, the game is drawn now. King d3, very important move, rook b2. But Vidit blunders with rook g1. The reason why rook b2 is strong is because after king c3, rook g2, and now the same position after b5, the king cannot jump here. But instead in the game, if you will see, rook g1, b5, after rook takes g3, if the rook moves, the draw is in sight with rook takes f3. But the king comes back, which is why making a waiting move was super important. But now rook g7 and it's all over because rook b6, rook coming behind the pawn, and well, what to do now? It's done and dusted. The white king will simply come and chop off these pawns. Vidit goes f4. He's hoping that Shak takes here and then he can draw the game. But of course Shakhriyar doesn't. He goes king d3, king to d5, and now waiting because black does not have good waiting moves. 5, he just simply is running out of moves. King c6, and now king comes up to c4. Yes, king c4, king d7, king c5, king c8 played. And rook to a5. The idea is to get in here, maybe rook a7, king b8, and yeah, rook a7 should do the trick. Very nice move, forcing the rook trade, and then the king quickly goes and rounds up these pawns. And Shakhriyar has managed to convert this endgame. Well, Vidit actually defended really well till a point, and he almost got the draw in his grasp, but the endgame was just too instructive, you know. And Vidit is now losing even the h5 pawn, and it's time to resign the game. He resigns. Shakhriyar Mamedyarov starts off with a win in the first round.